Hi, everyone. Welcome to the September 26th, 2024 meeting of the Gilman Square City Redevelopment Parcels Civic Advisory Committee, or the CAC. My name is Ben Demers. I'm a senior planner in economic development with the city. I use he, him pronouns. For this evening's meeting, I'm just going to make one quick note that we are doing this meeting over Zoom virtually. And so the one note about this is that in order to comply with open meeting law, which is essentially state guidance around how meetings like this are conducted, that guidance does not allow for a type of conversation called side conversation. And so the chat function amongst attendees has been disabled. So I just want to make a note of that. But if you would like to make a public comment at all this evening, please raise your hand. We have 2 public comment periods during the agenda, but we also, for any item that we're talking about, if you as a member of the public want to make a comment, we're always happy to stop and take that comment. Yeah. So just to review our agenda quickly for this evening, and you know what, let me make sure there's nobody in the other participants tab. Okay. Okay, so we are going to start with a roll call and approval of the previous meeting summary from our August meeting. We're then going to do our first public comment period. As well, items 3 and 4 here have been switched from the agenda if nobody objects to that. So we're going to start with an update on temporary activation of city-owned land in Gilman Square. We are joined by a member of Culture House's team to give us that update. And then we'll return to what we were working on during the August session, which is drafting a letter from the CAC to the Somerville Redevelopment Authority regarding the potential use of urban renewal on a site in Gilman Square. From there, we will shift to neighborhood updates from CAC members. Always want to keep this as a space for those updates, even outside of the project parcels that we look at. And then we'll have a final public comment period before adjourning. Are there anything anybody would like to add? So I'm going to start off with a quick roll call for attendance. Starting out with Diana.
Yes, here.
Yeah. Melinda. I haven't seen Melinda yet. I sent her a message, so hopefully she's able to join us shortly. Rom said he was not going to be able to mention it this evening, or to make it this evening. Jack is also not here. I sent him a message as well shortly ago, just to see if he's able to join, because he initially mentioned he should be able to. Jamie mentioned that she did have a conflict for this evening. Jennifer?
Present. Present.
Thank you. Michelle?
Present.
Thank you. And then Ben Elgart?
Present.
And Councillor Jesse Klingen?
Present.
And then Councillor Young Campen is not with us this evening. Okay. And then did everyone have a chance to review the meeting summary for the August meeting / were there any comments, or are people comfortable with me posting that online?
No comments, all set.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. And then we have our first public comment period. We do not currently have any members of the public in attendance this evening. It's good. I know there was also, I saw a message go out in the Gilman Square Neighborhood Council listserv about the city council meeting this evening. So some people might also be planning to go to that later this evening. Okay. With that, I can shift into our first substantive item. One second. Okay. So to check back in on the temporary activation of city-owned land in Gilman Square, so the Gilman pop-up space, just to, again, recontextualize as I try to do each time for somebody who might be tuning in for the first time or watching this recording, tuning in for the first time. So the city created a space in partnership with Culture House, which is a local placemaking and design firm, on a city-owned site in Gilman Square, 350 Medford Street, also known as the Homan's Lot. And so this temporary activation had several goals, which we're going to talk a bit about just in sort of a review presentation this evening. The timeline for this project was using ARPA funding, so from the American Rescue Plan Act, which meant that the funding had to be spent by the end of September, so the end of this month. So Culture House was doing sort of on-site work through September 8th, and then they've been doing some final deinstall and design and other sort of wrap-up elements over the month. So we mentioned in August presentation that the site is going to remain publicly accessible. So that's why you've been seeing some of maybe the final design elements going in. If you have walked by the site, there's been a mural going in this past week, some other design elements. Some of the artwork has been getting moved around from where it was previously on the scaffolding structure. So looking really good, hoping to still see people using the space. Culture House is also working on a final report to summarize learnings from the project. And so we have Rishika Dewan, who's the senior community manager from Culture House, with us this evening. And so she's going to be presenting a bit on just kind of reviewing the project and also talking about some of the learnings that they have found in this space over their 3 months there and their 6 months working on this project. They were looking both at learnings within Gilman Square specifically, where the site is situated, but then also this was the first of these sort of temporary activations that the city has done. So it's also been a big learning experience for us to understand exactly what this entails and what we need to do this successfully. So it's been sort of split on the recommendations about Gilman specific and then about these sorts of activations. Obviously in this space, we're kind of more focused on the Gilman specific piece of those activations. I will just say before handing it over to Rishika, big props. They did a lot of work on this in a very condensed time period. And I think we've seen a lot of success and a lot of activity in that square. So I will pass things over to Rishika. And I will stop sharing screen.
Thank you. Ben, I think I need permission to share my screen.
Yeah, every time. I apologize. Okay, you should have permission now.
Great. Well, like Ben mentioned, we've been working on kind of a install of the site. So kind of breaking some things down, but also making sure that we can leave some fun stuff behind. And at the moment working on a report. So what I'm going to share with you has a little bit about what happened at the pop-up and then also the recommendations that we will be putting into the report as well. So just to start with generally the project timeline, which Ben also already talked about, but just refreshing where we were. We started this in March, early April. And from April to May, we mostly did engagement, reaching out to stakeholders, communications and marketing materials, and some community pop-up events. And then April to June, we spent most of our time doing conceptual designs based on what we heard from the community, and then a lot of purchasing of materials and implementation during that time. We opened mid-June, and we were open for almost 3 months. We closed September 8th. And now we're in September, where we're working to analyze anything we learned from the site and then preparing recommendations for future placemaking as well. So just to refresh the goals of this project. So one was to connect Gilman Square to the rest of Somerville. So creating a central social, cultural, and civic hub in Gilman Square, establishing a space for local organizations to meet the community and restore the urban fabric of the square broken up by the vacant lot itself. Bring vibrancy to the Gilman Square neighborhood. So temporarily activate the vacant Homan's lot with events that respond to community needs. Design a hangout space for the community, focusing on teens and seniors. Create an identity for the neighborhood by highlighting its history, arts, and culture. And then testing out future uses for the vacant sites in Somerville. So connecting the learnings we learned from this activation to other temporary activations across city-owned land in Somerville, centering accessibility and environmental concerns, and creating a space for systemically marginalized community members to be active participants in this process. So that was the goals that we started it, and this is a little overview of the pop-up and the process itself. So we started with community engagement. We had conversations with the neighborhood council. I've been in CAC meetings over the last few months since we've been doing this, getting your feedback and sharing the process with you. We led design activity with the D-Lab students at the Somerville High School, and kind of worked with them on what they and specifically teens might want to use on this space. We talked to about 90 people at the Somerville Open Studios at Mad Oyster Studios who lived in and around Gilman Square, got their input. They're all very excited about this. And then we created posters, flyers, a website page, and things we could share with the community to make sure that they were up to date on what was happening. The design, so essentially the design followed 3 drivers. One was to encourage people to actually come and stay in this space. The other was to create a comfortable environment in all kinds of weather. And the last was ensuring that programming was accessible to people of all abilities. So this is kind of the general design that we came up with. We worked on a lot of the ground cover in terms of environmental concerns. We had initially talked about doing turf, but in further conversation, we moved towards mulch. And then we also worked on asphalt paving and working with the field team, the ADA field team at the city, and just understanding more of how can we make sure that all the programming is accessible to people of all abilities. So which we had to work through with putting paving on the site, just given the timeline and the budget that we had. This was the best way we could respond to that. And we worked to put a scaffolding up to kind of put this very like large, attractive piece in the center of the lot, essentially, that could kind of bring a lot of visitors, bring a lot of people who are curious off the street. But also we could find different uses for that as well, in terms of putting the hammocks in. The vendors use this during the market as well. And then providing a lot of furniture. We worked with Winter Hill Brewing initially when we started the design process. So we really knew that a beer garden was something we wanted to do. So working towards that and designing that area. So having the picnic tables, making sure the picnic tables were also accessible, and any other furniture on the site too. We worked with having the general infrastructure in terms of having the bathrooms and a generator for electricity. We had 2 accessible bathrooms and 1 regular non-accessible bathroom. And really, I know we started off with initial shading on the site, and also realized that we went through the summer how much more we needed, and really worked through the summer to make sure that we could bring more of that on the site, and is also something that we have definitely recommended. We have to work through what that looked like, how we could keep it up, and what worked best for the site. But this was the general overview of how we had started and the plan for this, for the pop-up. Some of our biggest challenges throughout this process was the timeline, because as Ben mentioned, this was an ARPA funded project, so it had to be completed by the end of September. So we also wanted to make sure that we were open and operating as long as possible, which also meant that we had to make decisions in a very short period of time and make sure that whatever we were able to put on the site responded to that timeline and was usable. And then additionally working through uncertainties. So these were just the process of getting this space built up as well. Just kind of the permitting process, the process of understanding the kind of materials we wanted to put on the site, and how we could also learn through this process and make sure that the next time a temporary activation is done, those things are also kept in mind. So it was really kind of challenging, but also learning experience for all of us. And then operations. So we hosted a total of 73 events over 3 months. 68% of the visitors that came by spent about an hour or more at the pop-up space. 43% of the visitors came to the pop-up for events or programs specifically. Oh, sorry. Saturdays with the anchor events where we had the markets in the beer garden and the food vendors, we saw between 400 to 700 visitors on that site all throughout the day. The lawn games and the hammocks were definitely a favorite that people used throughout the operations when there were events, when there were no events. People really loved those. And then visitors specifically, we had a total of 4,400 visitors that we counted. This was when staff was on site and when we were able to count. This is also when we had the beer gardens, it was really, there was a lot of people on the site. So really taking this number as it was probably a lot more than this. Thursdays between 4 to 8 p.m. is where we saw the busiest times of the week. So this was also when there were events and when there weren't events. We looked into both of those times and saw that usually people came in the afternoons and the evenings to hang out in the space. We saw a lot of kids in terms of like parents and their kids walking by in the evenings and then like playing for a while and then walking past it. So people really using it when there were no events happening as like a transient space to walk through and hang out for a little bit. We saw more BIPOC visitors when there were no events happening. And we saw a lot of feedback and also saw in general that families felt that there were a lot of activities for them to do and bring kids to as well. Challenges, the weather. It was really hard to work through the extreme heat, but also the rain and the wind. So when there was extreme heat, we had to work through making sure that our staff was also comfortable on the site and being there. We had to also make sure that anyone doing programming was informed of what we were going to do on the site, and also making sure that everyone else knew that if a program was not happening, how could we share that out with the community? And then similarly with rain and wind, we also had some issues with the umbrellas because of the wind. So really working through how we provided shading on that site too. Food vendors, this was obviously something that we heard from the community before we opened. This is something that we've talked as well in these meetings about having food vendors. So we were able to find and work with food vendors over most of the beer gardens and markets. It was, given the really short timeline of this project, most food vendors were already booked up for the summer. And it was really hard for us to then convince people to come. We also tend to see this in temporary activations where food vendors also want like a minimum of, can you guarantee how many people are going to be on the site? And that was hard for us to do because we don't know what kind of numbers we were going to see. Sorry, you could close it. And then we also with food vendors, there was a permitting process. While we were able to get the support from the city to support getting those permits for vending on the site, it was in general a confusing process also for vendors that we did find of understanding what they needed for these permits too. So we ran into a few challenges there as well. And then learnings and recommendations. So this is specifically Gilman Square. So the recommendations, we split them up in terms of infrastructure and then public space elements in general. So for infrastructure, just based on what we hear from the community and what we saw on the site as well, really looking for community space. I think people responded to surveys saying that they were really excited to kind of hang out with their neighbors, sit outside, and find a place that they can meet friends. We had a lot of events where it was not so much that an event was happening there, but a lot of people just wanted it to be a gathering point for people, like, hey, let's meet up here and then we'll go somewhere else and do something. We heard from people that, they were walking by and they really needed a place to stop and sit. And this was a place for them to do that on their way. So it's really seeing the need of having a space like that. Of course, really seeing the restaurants, bars, and cafes. The beer garden did really well. When we had the food vendors did really well as well. There were a lot of requests for having coffee in this space, and we tried really hard to make that happen. But really seeing that need there of wanting to do that. Green spaces, people really enjoyed being outside, even though it was really hot. People did show up, and just generally we had a lot of comments of people of like wanting more plants there, wanting the space to do more of that. So really seeing the need for green spaces. Public bathrooms, whether people game and hung out on the site, they definitely did come and use the bathrooms. And that's just definitely something really big we see in general, the lack of accessible public bathrooms that are also free to use. So we did see a lot of people just coming and being like, hey, can we use the bathroom? And, just using that. So really seeing the need for that. And then space and infrastructure for markets. The vendor markets did really well, but we also weren't able to provide as much as we could for them. They wanted to have a lot more vendors too, but really seeing how we can support that infrastructure for them too. Also, again, the shade aspect of for the vendors who didn't possibly have dens, and how can we work through that. And then in general, looking at public spaces in Gilman Square, and this is obviously shade, like I mentioned, that was really important in terms of the extreme weather that we do have now in the summers here. Protection from wind, just seeing how open the site is at the moment. That was really something big that we had not anticipated as we were building out. So a lot of the umbrellas did break because they were falling over. Looking at furniture that is a lot sturdier and can withstand that. So wind was definitely something. Movable furniture. So just having something that was really light and easy for people to move around really helps people make a space their own. So we always kind of see this need for movable furniture that people can move around and kind of hang out in the way that they want to in those spaces. Hammocks, and this is not specifically hammocks, but it's more as like having this like fun activity that really draws people in. I think people walking past the site didn't really think there was going to be a hammock over there. And they enjoyed there were people who spent their afternoon in them. There were kids who would run to them and kind of use them as swings. So really having that element of play as well, of like, what are the different ways that people can use a space outside of kind of sitting and gathering. Public art. Y'all must have seen all the sculptures that came up. That was by the artist who has been putting up sculptures on the community path as well. And he was really excited to put work. He brought a bunch of his friends to also put work up there. And he's going to continue to do that, which is really exciting. He wants to make like an outdoor public art gallery of sorts. So very excited to see that happen. But really, public art really brings people in. It helps people feel more comfortable in a space, can start conversations, and it's definitely something that has been really important. If you've seen, the mural has started going up, and just putting the mural on the asphalt has also just made it a lot more welcoming and a lot more accessible to anyone who might want to walk by. Space to walk through. The asphalt itself, we didn't see this coming, but a lot of people just used it as like their walking path. We saw people just like wanting to like not walk on the sidewalk, but wanting to walk through the asphalt. So finding like more interesting ways to walk around. We had little kids who would also bike through. So even using it for that. So really seeing how in a public space, how can you create that space of like an interesting way for people to walk through and experience their spaces around them. But this was specifically Gilman Square in this area. This is temporary activations in general. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna ask Risha, I know you were gonna open it up at some point. Would you mind if
Yes,
before, just because I know Deanna has to head out at
Oh,
some point.
yeah,
That's
sure,
not, that's
sure.
not pressure to make comment if you don't want to, but just wanna, one of the things I did want to ask about in this space is, okay, yeah, no worries. Was just gonna ask about if people had anything that they would maybe want to think about adding to this recommendation section.
Mhm.
Yeah, also she had to head out, so no worries.
Okay. Yeah, I do
maybe-
have that. Yeah, but yeah.
Cool. Yeah, if you want to finish this up, we can then go into conversation.
Yeah, this is the last one, but yeah, I can do
No
that.
worries.
Awesome. Great. And then this is recommendations more largely for temporary activation. So programming, really having that one anchor activity like we did for the beer garden and the market. Really brings a lot more people to the site and brings them back. And then passive activities. So the cornhole, having the hammocks, having we had a lot of games and art supplies out. We also had the ping pong tables. So really having activities that people can do in the space outside of a specific event. The design process itself, so really just in terms of where we were with this process, in terms of the timeline and all of us kind of learning through this process, really kind of scoping and making sure you can do what's actually possible on the site, as well as setting kind of realistic expectations and goals. And then in-depth community engagement. We did kind of we didn't do as much as we wanted to do to learn from the community in terms of including them in this process and including them in designing and programming. So really kind of recommending that going forward, really setting those expectations as well as what does community engagement look like. And then specifically design recommendations. So landmark, with the scaffolding, that was kind of something that we were trying to do on the site, was really create something that people can like see and feel kind of drawn to and want to find out what's happening. So doing that. Identity, so really focusing on who is in the neighborhood, how do we bring those stories and those people into the space. Adaptability, really people, and this is generally something we see at Culture House as well in the work that we do, is that people are going to use a space the way that they want to. So really looking at like flexible and movable furniture so that people can kind of move things around and make it how they need or want. But then also understanding that there are things that you might have to learn as you open and be able to kind of adapt to those changes within that time. Infrastructure, so really what does the site need to be functional? And this is also in terms of generally the generator itself was a lot that we had not anticipated how loud it would be, and we had to work through that. So really seeing what the basic infrastructure on the site is. We also did not have access to running water, so that was definitely something that we recommend, is having access to running water and electricity. Durability, so really how long are you building this site out for? Is it 3 months? Do you want it to last longer than that? What does that look like? And then art, I mean, just making it colorful and making a space that people feel attracted to, want to come to, and kind of catches the eye, and really using art to do that. Yeah, and then I did have that, yeah. So this is just generally the pop-up is staying open. It's going to be a temporary space. This is also an image of the mural that's going up, which is very exciting. It's looking really great. But the space will be open until the redevelopment begins, or any maintenance needs to be done on the site, and it has to be closed down. All the infrastructure, including artwork, will eventually need to be removed when the site is redeveloped. And the city will be communicating on any updates on the site as they move forward with keeping the space open. That's all I had, but also just wanted to open it up just kind of around Ben's question of, is there anything that stood out to you during this pop-up that you feel like we haven't included, and things that we should include, and things you saw on the site itself and during the activation.
Yeah, thank you, Rishika.
Yeah, I can stop sharing my screen as well.
Ben, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Ben Algarty, him. This was a really great overview of the insights and learnings. It's really exciting to hear. One thing that I loved how you expressed was how it's not just like having a place to sit, but like a hammock isn't just a regular place to sit. It allows for some exploration. It doesn't have to be a hammock. It could be, I don't know, like an interesting sculptural thing, but that it allows for some exploration is really valuable, and that it was also for the walking paths, right? Some people just wanted to walk in a different way, and use a space to travel through. I really hope, I know that you had like a bulleted list for us, but those are the kinds of things I think really need to be shared, because we've heard time and time again that even the neighbors, older neighbors need a place to sit. But like the fact that if we just put in regular benches, we're not going to also tap into that ability to make it more exploratory for the children who need it, or for the young at heart who need it. That's something that I think we really need to see, so that we can make sure that that gets into how we want to continue to make sure it gets activated, and hopefully have a neighborhood as permanent activations. But I really love that angle, and I think it kind of hit on a couple different places, so that was great to see. The other thing that I was wondering about was, we heard like retail is good, but I think we need some more color and texture to like what people connected with, and even if it's just conjecture, like we don't want, I don't know, a car showroom there. So it's not like all retail is going to do it, but I think the kind of vendors that were there, whether it was something about what they were selling or the way that they were of the neighborhood, I just think that also needs to really come through. Because, and I know it's not something like we do talk about that more than kind of the wonder of walking in a, in a circuitous path, but I think that that's the kind of color and texture that really comes to life when it's backed by months of insight. So I'm really looking forward to like that angle being expressed, because I think that that would really help make sure that Gilman Square stays representative of the neighborhood and the neighborhood needs. But thank you so much. That was awesome.
Does anyone else have anything they wanted to share just about like things that they, either recommendations that they would have coming out of spending time in the activation, or just like ways that it changed how they thought about the space or interacted with the space?
Counselor Klingon here. I don't have any questions. I just want to say, thank you to Rishika for and all her staff for all the work they put into this. Thanks for the presentation. That's really all I have.
Thanks, Counselor.
My only thought is also to say thank you, but to see that it's interesting that your observations and the observations of your staff, who didn't necessarily hear any of what we all have been talking about for the last couple of years, how it really did echo what we thought might be the desires of the community based on if we tried to put something there and how they might respond to it. So it was really nice, particularly, I will personally say it was really nice to hear the request for coffee in the area. So, because that is something I've been missing direly when I go to work over there. But yeah, it's very much it was good to hear things reaffirmed that we had explored and thought that we'd gotten right. And it was nice to see that once something was there for people to respond to, they were continuing to emphasize that. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for having all your staff and everyone collect those observations along the way.
Ben, I see your hand again.
Yeah. One thing that I was also thinking about is, as we wrestle with kind of what the right amount of different activations could be in the future, how much seating, how much open space, I think getting a sense of that angle of like how much was used, or like when events were being held, did they use more space, and were families able to use less space, or was it the opposite way around? Like people wanted more space to run around in and they needed more space. I think there's some questions around that might have come out of the last 3 months that would be great to see documented, if there are insights like that.
Jennifer.
Along those lines, the effect of the wind, I just thought of this, that you really observe that because of the way the site is currently situated, there is a large impact from wind. And I think one of the useful things as we look towards the development of the site is to make sure that that doesn't get emphasized, that whatever goes up there isn't a giant block of structure, but also so that it doesn't create any wind tunnels. Because I've experienced those downtown and they make it impossible to move through the space. So I think bringing that, Ben, that's probably more your part of this conversation, but just making sure that whenever we suggest, whenever developer finally does come forward, to make sure that the design takes into account the amount of wind coming down the hill or up against the hill.
Yeah, definitely. I believe in the planning review process, they're required, like, development teams of a project of like a particular size are required to do a wind study. I know there's like a shadow study and some certain others that I'm more certain of, but I believe wind is also a part of that because of that concern of wind tunnels. But if it's not, I think making sure that it's something that is discussed in the RFP process. Michelle?
Sorry. Oh, I'll start my video too. I just wanted to say that I think everything went really well. They did a great job, but similar to what Jennifer was saying, I wanted to emphasize not just the coffee, but there seemed to be a real want for different food spaces. And so I think that should definitely be something that we think of in our terms of our future development. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, definitely. I think even for like the shortcomings that Rishka mentioned of like some of the constraints that existed for the project made it difficult to like provide more food options on the site. I think it doesn't cancel out that we recurringly heard about the need for more food spaces. So I think that's still shown in the data. But yeah, appreciate that. Are there any other final comments? Michelle, I'm assuming your hand is still up from previous comment. Cool. Okay, well, with that, I want to say a final huge thank you, both for this presentation and for all the work over the past few months. Again, I've said it a few times, it was a condensed time period. We learned a lot in this process. And it was, not always an easy process that we put in front of y'all. So just very appreciative of it. And it was, as people mentioned, it was good to hear reaffirmed some of the things that have been discussed in the CAC in the past. So thank you, Rishka. Thank you, Koldrow's team, for that.
Thank you. Thanks for letting us be a part of this.
Cool. And yeah, I'll just mention that, as Rishka mentioned, there's going to still be kind of art on the site over the next period of time as it remains open. So, if you also have any art that you're interested in bringing to the site, it's a little more like DIY in the structure of it right now, but it's been cool to kind of see the art that has remained like on the scaffolding. Also, though, we'll stress, if you notice any issues with the site and things like that, please bring it to my attention. Again, this is a space where like it's not quite our normal civic space process, but it's acting still as that like temporary civic space. And so, wanting to make sure that it's at a standard where people still want to engage. Very excited to see the mural go in. I think it's still going to feel inviting in many ways. Shade will be a question that we continue to grapple with, but definitely feel free to use this space or ever message me directly if you're noticing anything about it. Cool. Okay, Rishka, we won't take any more of your evening, but thank you again for joining. Okay, with that, I'm going to shift us. Okay. I'm going to shift us into the next agenda item, which is discussing the letter to the Somerville Redevelopment Authority that we had worked on drafting at the last meeting. I did anticipate that we would have more members based off of responses to email, so I apologize that we're feeling like a slightly smaller group this evening. I know this is something that in general we want to try to find consensus around. Are people still comfortable this evening kind of talking through some of the edits? I know that I sent the draft last month, so it's not like vastly different. But just want to check in how people feel about that. Jennifer?
I'm just curious. This is a curiosity procedural question. Do we need a quorum to?
Yeah, so I know that I brought up that concern in the past. When I looked back at that had been my impression when I started to manage this group. When I look back at the charter, there's nothing specific about the necessity for quorum. It talks about consensus. And so, we could decide as a group to reflect like the way that we sign off the letter based off of who is present. But I think also like this is something that a lot of members of the group have discussed. And so I think we would still assume a certain level of consensus, and we've kind of given the opportunity to show like there can be disagreement in this letter. So yeah, not
night.
yeah.
Yes. Okay, cool. Great, thank you.
So are people generally comfortable still kind of discussing edits? Ben?
Oh, yeah, I would be comfortable discussing edits, and when you're ready, I have some.
Sounds good. Okay, let me pull up the. Yep, that was the language, sorry. Okay, so again, I'm just going to give real quick context for anybody who's tuning in. So we have been drafting this letter over the last few sessions as a way for the Civic Advisory Committee to express to the Somerville Redevelopment Authority, which is the entity in Somerville that oversees the process of urban renewal. So been using this letter as a way to express to the SRA sort of the desire to potentially move forward with an urban renewal process or really explore an urban renewal process. So have that conversation at the SRA. And this is in consideration of a potential urban renewal process for 360 Medford Street, which is the mobile station that is directly adjacent to a city-owned parcel within the land or within the square. And this is something that has been discussed sort of at the CAC and in other community forums and in the Gilman Square station area plan for the last decade, realistically. So just kind of giving more specificity to those ideas. So I drafted an initial letter and we had walked through last month and then heard edits from CAC members, which I tried to incorporate text in blue. So we can also walk through, we don't have to go through every edit individually. Then I did want to check in. I mentioned something here about the neighborhood council, but I imagine there might also be more details that you want to make sure are mentioned. And so kind of just started with this, trying to keep the letter still at like a manageable length, but happy to add more detail on these things. Also tried to give some more of the context around how urban renewal and just the development of the Homans Lot in general and a preparedness of development kind of plays in with other planning priorities in the area. And then, yeah, tried to mention some more of, how urban renewal, but also just like how we can try to achieve community benefits through sort of a coordinated approach development on the site and the prioritization for developing the city-owned lot at 350 Medford Street in conjunction with the mobile station. So yeah, any edits that anyone has, please raise your hand. I can add more comments on this and we can either try to incorporate them this evening or if there are substantive edits that anyone has, I would just ask to have some time to make those afterwards. But Ben, it sounded like you were ready to go.
I am. I think there's a paragraph that begins: the study was spurred partially by an incident at the Winter Hill Community Innovation School.
Yeah,
and
so
that might have been.
Yep, here we are.
Okay,
the disposition
great.
study. Yeah,
I think so we do know that I think there should be a slight change in order to reflect that there was a disposition study that was initially that put the disposition study put things on hold on the Gilman Square lot before the Winter Hill School issue happened. And so I think that could be clarified more clearly. Because it wasn't really just the Winter Hill Community Innovation School, which meant, we were told that the disposition study would have held things back anyway. It just was more pressing after the school started coming apart.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I can add a clarification on that.
Okay. There are a couple other things, and this is where you might not want to include it, but like everything from like an underground tank to be included to was the Y gonna move there? Like there are some other things that really also slowed things down. I don't know if you want to include that level of detail. But there were a number of things that like also pushed back kind of some coordination efforts around Gilman Square.
Yeah, that's been like the balance I've been trying to strike in drafting this of like how much of that background context to add.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately though, it's really up to y'all. So if that's context that you would like added, then that is context that I will add. can talk about
Um,
where that would maybe go.
I think, yeah, I think it's a bit cart or horse. I think by including the disposition, I think if the disposition study is kind of prioritized over the school, as in like that was an exercise that the city wanted to do. There are different reasons to do that, whether it's because of underground tanks, what property is going to do what. I think that might kind of set the tone more clearly than any one of the things, even the school, right? Any one incident. So,
Okay, yeah, I
that
can
may
kind
be
of tie that in with this.
that may be enough of a setup. Because ultimately, yeah, I think it was like city process, not like any one of the things it was the city was balancing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can add that context in here because yeah, I don't think it was until like the Winter Hill School incident happened in June 2023, but it wasn't until like February of that year that we had said publicly in that community meeting that the possibility of a tank on the site would not hold up development, but it was still obviously like a part of the conversation and it had been a big part of the conversation for like the previous year.
Yeah. But like, yeah, it wasn't like, do we even need a tank there? It was like, where else would it go kind of conversation. That's all disposition of like what assets are doing what for the city.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can add that in.
Thanks.
Does anyone else have any edits that they wanted to make? Okay, not seeing any. In that case, I can incorporate that kind of final edit. And so we can go kind of one of two ways on this. So either I can incorporate this and then send out again like an edited draft. I'll turn the rest of this blue text to black, and then I'll just make a new sentence or two here that is in blue text for people to review. Jennifer, I see your hand up.
I'm seeing it and I'm reminded of the one thing I noticed. It's the tiniest thing, but in the second paragraph from the bottom on that page, whoop, nope,
Oh,
go
sorry.
back.
Yeah.
Nope, up.
This one.
There we go. That one, mobile convenience store.
Rather than station.
No, no, down at the bottom, the very second to last. Well, yeah, there we go. Convenience store.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah. Former proofreader, sorry.
No, I really
was-
appreciate that.
But literally, that was the only thing I noticed out of the whole thing.
I do. I know that Nana also mentioned that she had some edits, but again, she kind of engaged with some of the larger edits in the last meeting. So like I was saying, kind of two ways that we could go forward. So one, we could kind of generally agree on this in this session, and then we could plan for this to go to the redevelopment authority. Or we can incorporate these edits, come back a final time, aim to have kind of more membership at the next meeting. And again, I do apologize. I know people are giving their time to these meetings, and I hoped that based on the email response I'd gotten that we were going to have some more members present this evening. And so we could also plan to come back together at the end of October and do just kind of like a final send up, but I don't want to delay the process more if people kind of want to feel things moving. I do want to note on that though. So this will potentially go to the SRA at their October meeting, but they're just as the person who also creates the agendas for the SRA needs to keep those of a manageable length. This might go at their November meeting, so it'd be the beginning of November rather than the beginning of October anyways. So just to be transparent on that, they have like another topic they're planning to discuss at the beginning of the October meeting. And so I'm trying to just make sure that there's going to be enough time where they can really like take this in and have conversation about the specific letter and like what we're thinking about in Gilman Square.
Ben,
Yeah, Counselor.
what's the topic they're discussing?
So in Union Square, there's they're like just finishing up with the development of what is called the D2 parcel, so 10 to 50 Prospect Street. So these are the buildings at the intersection of Somerville Ave and Prospect Street. And this is the first part of the plan where they're essentially like completing a phase. And so they are likely going to be asking questions of the development team on that topic. And then there's a whole process that I don't need to get into, but the SRA essentially has to vote to approve, to say, yes, this phase of the plan was done. That's essentially how urban renewal plans often work out. And it just says like, yes, you've completed this phase of it. And so if a developer or something is trying to go for refinancing their project, too much context, but that'll probably be a large part of the conversation in October.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I hope this gets on the October agenda. I don't think it's gonna take that much time for them to, you know, review or whatnot. But that would be my hope. But and I think so. I don't know, Ben. I think so. Is the Gilman Square Neighborhood Council, are they gonna like kind of put their endorsement on the letter as well? I think they heard something.
We hadn't discussed that in a more formal way. I have a meeting with the neighborhood council early October. Obviously, Ben is also here representing the neighborhood council. But if we want to kind of, I think it's probably helpful to keep the process slightly. Yeah, I mean, if this letter comes from the CAC, and obviously kind of thinking about any neighborhood council feedback being funneled through Ben as the representative of the GSNC on the committee. We also, though, you know, these meetings are generally kind of open to the public if people want to give more feedback, but keep in mind that like if the SRA decides to start to explore urban renewal in the area, like that community process, that would definitely be one that we were like doing more outreach to get people engaged in. This is sort of just like the initial communication from the CAC.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, they can give comment there or whatever. It doesn't have to, we don't have to muddy things up too much, but yeah, I hope that we can get this on the agenda for October. And I hope that we can when is the date, when is the October date gonna be? Like, I'm hoping we can finalize this with everybody like soon.
Well, I think one of the options is essentially finalizing in this meeting. The October meeting is going to be October 7th. And again, I hear the prioritization. I understand. I do also need to respect some of the things that are in motion. And so just trying to like not rush it just for the sake of getting it on in October versus November. But I do also understand that we've been having this conversation for, 6 months of the year already.
Sorry, Councillor Klingon, I don't want to interrupt, but to that point, I was wondering, since we don't have a lot of representation here, but since we do want to move it forward, could you make that one, the big edit in red, and then send it out and basically give people one last opportunity via email to comment on it? Or does it have to be done in the meeting context? Or basically just to send their stamp of approval?
Yeah, if people are comfortable with that, I'm happy to do it that way and just say, if people have any final rounds of feedback, please feel welcome to send it. And I mean, I can gauge at that point if I'm getting significant feedback. I can say, oh, it seems like we really need to talk about this in a group forum again.
Right.
But assuming that does not happen, then I could just incorporate, Diana's final edits and things like that, and then send it. Ben?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that I like that idea. I especially like that idea because the comments that we're bringing up are really about the background. They're not really about the recommendation itself. So, everyone should be like okay with the recommendation. That's not changing.
Cool. Michelle?
I third that idea.
Cool.
I think that's the way to go.
Okay. Yeah, so let me incorporate this last edit and then I can send out another email to CAC members, give them a chance to respond. And again, if not the October meeting, then the goal would be to get it on the November agenda. But again, I understand this has already been a long process this year.
Yeah. Also, because if we wait until our next meeting, that's not until the end of October. And so if they're big edits, then, we'd have to incorporate them before this November meeting. So
yeah, I will say in general, Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just gonna say, so I think doing it by email feels like a way to finish our side of it, and then if it gets on the October meeting schedule, great. If it'll be done. If it doesn't until November, then that's also still fine, but we're done with it.
Totally. Yeah, I think the only thing I'm thinking about is just like kind of the standards of like open public process in it. But again, I think we've had multiple meetings talking about this. So even if the text changes slightly, this is something that, you know, people have seen the text. So yeah, I feel comfortable with that generally. And it sounds like other CAC members do also. Cool. And I will make that last edit. And I will send out an email, if not tomorrow, then early next week, to get final feedback from CAC members. Cool. Anything else we want to talk about in the letter space? Again, thank you all for live editing and things like that. Appreciative of the patience with that process. Okay, with that, I'm going to shift into the fifth substantive item, which is neighborhood updates from CAC members. So just checking in if anybody has anything in the neighborhood they want to make known. I think last time Ben and I both mentioned that the neighborhood council hosted the Gilman Arts and Music Festival. It was on September 14th. Just as like a look back, that was a very successful event. Ben, I don't know if you want to add anything else on that.
No, it was.
Sorry to put you on the
And
spot.
hopefully people got to participate in some way. It was really nice. And I think let me see if I have more data around it, because Scott always puts together really good summary emails, but yeah, let me check on that for everyone.
Ben, while he's doing that.
Yeah.
So I just
Counselor
wanted to let
Klingon,
everybody know about the
Oh, you broke up for a second, but
What?
now I think it got clearer. Okay.
Oh, I was saying you might have the dates in front of you. I'm not sure, but just want I want everybody to know about the Pearl Street West community meeting regarding not a full redesign, but yeah, they're gonna do sidewalks, and I guess this is, so my understanding is this is actually one that is going to be like legitimately sort of presented to the people before any decision has been made. So in other words, like there's a couple options, like it could be, you know, lose parking on both sides and do a bike. There's not enough room to do a bike lane on both sides. So it could be bike lane on one side, keep parking on one side. It could be no, but anyway, so that's the way they presented it to me, that it was going to be so that, it wasn't like the community sometimes feels like, oh, this is a done deal. They're actually, so it's an important meeting to go to, I think, for people who want to, have a say in that.
Yeah, I will say I don't have the date in front of me. If you do, Counselor Klingon, if not, I can search quickly to try to find it. But yeah, so just to add context on that. So this is the city's mobility division is going to be hosting a community meeting at X date that we are about to fill in about the streetscape redesign for Pearl Street. Or I guess it's not really, I think redesign is too strong of a word in this case. It's like streetscape improvements. But there is also with the city's bike network, I can't remember the exact name of the plan, but the planning document that was adopted by the city council last year that kind of focuses on the implementation of bike networks within the city. Pearl Street is a space that has shown a two-way bike lane, but this will also kind of impact, things like parking and like traffic on the street. And so, as Councilor Klingon mentioned, really kind of looking to come at the beginning and say, what are people looking to keep on this street? What kind of improvements are people looking to keep or looking to make? Yeah, so that's going to be run by the city's mobility division. Councilor, do you happen to have the date in front of you?
I don't. I apologize. I'm moving around.
Oh,
I'm
that's
on my way to City Hall.
Let me send a message to my coworker and see if
I have to be sitting down and not have other things in my hands.
All good. It cut out there for a second. Let me see if I can find it. And if I am not able to find it now, then I will send an email to CAC members or just kind of include it when I send out the letter and just mention, by the way, this is the date for that meeting.
I have a quick question on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is Ben Algard. I know there have been previous conversations. You said mobility division, and that just kind of sparked a question in my mind. There have been other more sidewalk oriented, streetscape oriented that were the efforts specifically like closer to Gilman Square. Were those also coordinated through mobility, or was that different? Because I remember that being more about, I don't know, like what sometimes is referred to beautification, but more like the bioswales, that kind of orientation, and less about mobility per se.
I mean, those were just
Yeah.
conversations that the the community were having and trying to push the city towards doing something on Medford Street. This is actually something that's coming. And they prioritize a certain way. This has probably been in the pipeline for probably before we were actually having those other discussions. But so yeah, there's nothing in the pipeline. My understanding it for Medford Street right now.
Okay.
Just
Does that mean this is more comprehensive? That would this also include the potential for bioswales, or are we just talking about? I guess maybe that's the part that isn't clear in my mind.
I'm not sure about that. I think that's
Yeah.
something that if you,
So this is sidewalks and yeah, it's not comprehensive. I don't think they're not removing the curbing. They're not it's weird. It's like it's in the middle of like, it's in the middle of in terms of the size of projects that the city does, it's in the middle of like a total redesign and just like a sidewalk quick job.
Okay, so
yeah,
not quite what we're seeing right now on School Street, right? Where we're seeing a lot more bump outs, some pretty severe accessibility enhancements, right?
I'll be honest, Ben, I'm not totally sure. I think this is yeah, like I think talking about green infrastructure can definitely be a part of these conversations. So I definitely, like, if you have that question, just even about the scope, I can try to ask more specific questions of our mobility team, but also I think would definitely get more clarity on that at that meeting. Just to also answer your earlier question about like, were some of those earlier pieces through mobility? I'll just make a general comment that like in general, streetscape work and things like when you're talking about bioswales, like it's any streetscape work and streetscape design or redesign is generally a conversation between our mobility team and then also our engineering division, who is often like doing some of the more technical pieces of that. So some of the bioswale conversations maybe were through engineering in the past, but those two teams work very closely together on streetscape redesign, and they're both kind of engaged in these processes.
Okay. And
I
also
know
wait and see is totally legitimate. Come and find out is
yeah, I think
I'm
that's
okay
probably
with
the best answer on this.
Okay.
Yeah, Jennifer.
I just wanted to say, I just went to scour the mobility division part of the website, and there's nothing about it there that I can find.
Okay.
So I don't know how much of that has been made public at all yet. So
It's definitely being like discussed publicly, but it's just in terms of what they've had to.
Oh no, there's a meeting on the books as well as they were tabling at the Gilman Square festival. I just gotta find it. Hold on one second.
yeah, none of it's on the city website that I could find.
Give me 30 seconds to see what I can see. Okay, so just gonna share screen again quickly. So Somerville launches Western Pearl Street reconstruction project with October 9th virtual community meeting. So that gives us an answer on the date. And then this page also, so if you just look up Western Pearl Street reconstruction or with the date, this should come up on Google. I can also share the link in the notes. Yeah, this gives you a space to register for the meeting.
Yeah, Ben, so any question, Ben, Elgard, any questions that you have regarding, you know, Medford Street or anything? I mean, the mobility team will be there. It'll be you know, you can ask there. I'm not 100% sure. You know, I can't always remember everything. I'm not 100% sure what the answer was for the Medford Street. For Medford Street, redesign, like why, like where is it on the docket? Yeah, and you know, we pushed them pretty hard about the bioswales and just making improvements. And that was a whole nother fight, whole nother issue. But just speaking on the redesign, I'll have to check with mobility and see where it is in the queue.
I will say that part of the discussion, I think, of this meeting and something that they will take feedback on is even if like, so this is focused on Western Pearl, so it's not focused on Medford Street as Councillor Klingon is referencing, but the intersection of Medford and Pearl can be sort of a part of the conversation for this, and that's obviously one we talk a lot about. So if you have comments about that specific intersection, please feel welcome to bring them. Jennifer, you're muted, but it looks like you said something. I'm assuming you were agreeing that that intersection
Is a disaster. Yes, I'm totally talking to myself.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yep. No, it's a mess.
Is there anything else that anybody wants to share about things happening in the neighborhood? Cool. With that, I can shift us into second public comment. So we do not have a member of the public with us this evening. So I do not anticipate any public comments. Is there anything else? I know we just did sort of the other neighborhood updates, but is there anything else that anybody wants to add? Okay. So in that case, I will follow up from this by sending out the edited letter and just getting any final amount of feedback. I do want to check in. So if this doesn't end up going until the November meeting, do people still want to come back together in October if there are no updates at that point? Or do we want to kind of plan to come together once we've actually kind of, the SRA has had a chance to digest this a bit, and then come back together once there's more of a response to talk through?
I would say that we should only meet if it ends up on the November. I mean, you have to know within days from now, right? I'm like, I would imagine, because it's getting close to October, whatever you
Yeah,
said.
so I'll know by the end of next week.
Yeah. So I think if it doesn't make it on there, then we might as well just meet one more time in person and just, you know, if anybody has anything to express before we send it to the SRA
Okay.
in November. That's my my vote. I don't know.
Yeah, I
other
guess I
people
just
think?
want to make sure I'm being respectful of everyone's time on that. So do other CAC members agree that if this doesn't end up going to the November meeting, that we would meet in late October, or do you want to wait either way?
I would say that unless when you send it out now, people really want to dig into it again.
Yeah.
I would rather skip that, because the third Thursday is a week. And the fourth Thursday is actually Halloween. So that would be a challenging
Hmm.
night for people to meet. Is it 1, 2, 3?
I think the
Sorry.
fourth, I think it's the
The
fifth, so the
fourth
fourth would be the 24th,
is the 24th, right? Okay.
but still, Michelle?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
that's okay. I agree. I think that, we've gotten as far as we've gotten with the letter. I don't think we need to rehash it at this point, unless there's a lot of comments that come when you send out the final draft.
Yeah.
And then we can revisit the issue of another meeting.
Makes sense. So I will still plan to share that. And then I will let people know if there are substantive updates. Great. Thank you all for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And yeah, if you have any other questions in the meantime, please feel welcome to reach out. Otherwise, I think we can move towards adjournment if nobody else has anything. Cool. All right. For all of us who are sick, please feel better. Hopefully
Thank
people
you.
enduring the cold. It's good to see everyone.
Be well, everybody.
Thank you very much.